Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha. I head up brand awareness at Reveal. On episodes of eDiscovery Leaders Live, I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. Our guest this week is Joe Friend. Joe is a partner at AITHERAS. And Joe, tell me if I pronounced that name, not your name, but the organization name properly.
Yeah, you did a wonderful job. Most of the time, it takes us at least 2 to 3 times to prep people on how to say the word. So you did excellent. Thank you.
And I'm terrible on the prepping because I get prepped and 2 seconds later I forget it all
Yeah,
for the
well,
names.
I have very similar issues. So I actually said the word wrong for a year before the 2 other leaders corrected me. So you're doing very well.
Well, let's start then. Along the way, tell me what the name is, but tell me first a little bit. Tell us first a little bit about who you are, how you got to what you do now, and what it is you do now, and where you do it at.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated that introduction that you did. I have watched your podcast before, so I feel very honored to be here. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a luminary. I think otherwise I've just been around for a very long time doing this work, and it was never anything I really planned to do. So I've been in the litigation support arena for over 25 years now. I started with a firm right out of school. I did my master's in the University of Oklahoma in computer science. I thought I was going to go more down a traditional road of computer science, but I got a really good job offer in Washington, D.C. for working at a law firm, King and Spalding. And that was where I got my first sort of bath into litigation support. It was during Y2K. We had converted them over to their new system, because everybody thought the world was going to crash. Obviously, nothing happened dramatically, which we knew, but it was nice to be part of their team to upgrade their system. Shortly after that, there wasn't a whole lot to do, and so I was approached by the litigation support arena, and that's where the bug bit me. And I can remember the first time I was supporting a live trial that I thought, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And I don't know why, but I just really got into the fact that I could use my technical skills to support these attorneys to make their lives much easier and much more effective by using, even at that point, rudimentary tools. I think our first e-discovery platform, not that we called it that, was an Access database that actually just housed the number of documents so that we could actually find the exhibits in the paper so that we could present them to the judge, or put them on an overhead projector and show that we had a demonstrative for the evidence that we were trying to portray. And then technology began to enter into e-discovery, and that's where I have been ever since. My second stint was basically with the federal government. I worked for a company that's no longer in existence, and came about and just started into supporting the Department of Justice across the board with just a variety of very antiquated tools that were ineffective in helping the government with these massive cases. And when I first got there, I was looking at cases that had been in existence for 20 years that had amassed literally warehouses full of paper. And I was like, well, what are we doing with this? And they're like, well, what can we do with it? So we set about to create a system, which is what very first of its kind, that would actually OCR. And we didn't even call it OCR then. We just scanned the document and put it into the system, and then we figured out a way of taking out the text so that it was searchable. And this was revolutionary. I mean,
And
this was real revolutionary stuff then.
and did you keep the images?
Sorry?
Did you keep the images when you
We
scanned the
did.
documents?
Yes,
Okay.
we were actually able to keep the images. Now, we did have a lot of network issues because
Mhm.
then we couldn't really reduce the actual level of the images down to a smaller footprint at that time. So oftentimes, if we had a large document, it would take a long time for it to render across the network. So all of this, sort of pioneering stuff, um, we would go out to industry and say, "Hey, do you have anything like this?" And I can remember talking to, um, I can't remember the gentleman's name now that owned Concordance. We went out to Los Angeles and we went to his office and we said,
Jeff,
"Hey, you,
Jeff Lipsman.
yes,
Yes.
thank you so much." I was having a hard time remembering his name, and I said, "Hey, how can we use your tool more for some of our medium-sized cases?" And his response was, "Well, what's a medium-sized case to you?" And I said, "Well, probably anywhere from 50 to 300,000 records." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, we can't do anything like that." He said, "But let me think about it for a little while." And then he came up with a way to concatenate the databases, and we're able to have a tool that we could at least use for some of our medium cases. Some of our cases were huge. We're talking literally millions of records, and nobody had anything like that. Now, today, all of this is very second nature, right? I mean, today we have tools such as Reveal and other tools that are, able to infinitely take care of all of this and provide us with amazing analysis and AI and all of this stuff that is just, in my mind, is just revolutionary and so helpful to the industry. Not that it takes over the actual experience and the requirements that attorneys need to understand the law, but it helps them understand and get to the meat of the documents and begin to do this triage that was so needed back in the day. And I remember presenting to the Department of Justice and the Assistant Attorney General that because of now electronic data, which was brand new in 2006 and 2005, is like, we now have email. What are we going to do with email? We have so much email. And they were just concerned and baffled with this problem. As we're today, we can just handle email. We don't even think about it. It's just automatically, it's now a thing, right? We don't even think about processing email. It goes in, we process it, we categorize it, we create it. But back then, email was a real problem. We had Lotus Notes, we had, and that was really hard to deal with. um, Dating myself a little bit, we were using JFS Litigator's Notebook to deal with Lotus Notes, and then we had another system that dealt with Outlook, and we had another system that dealt with other email products at the time, and then Hotmail and Gmail all started coming into the picture. And now today we have, social media and short messaging, which is really sort of the big challenge today, right? How do we catch bad guys who are using social media and text messages and code words and whole other languages that that investigators need to understand and unravel for these time frames? And I know that Reveal has been very proactive, and Brainspace, the team that you have assembled has really own this particular problem. And there'll be future problems. I may not be doing this much longer, but there'll be future problems that we're going to have to uncover as well. um, but now we've solved massive amounts of data issues. We've solved short messaging, we've solved audio transcripting and video transcripting, and we're getting ready to release and changed the world when it comes to understanding short messaging, which is now the preferred way of communication because everybody knows that if you have an email, it's out there forever. And don't know why people didn't have that before, but they definitely understand now that email is, is critically damaging, to them. So they're trying to find other ways to obfuscate and to go around and communicate electronically. Um,
And
if
so
you
it was, and so it shall be, right?
exactly. So
Um,
I always view this job, George, as inflation proof. There's always bad guys out there. There's always stuff. And I remember telling, a colleague of mine who asked me, why did you get into this? And I said, it will never go away. We are a
so
litigant society and we will continue forever in litigation.
the litigation may not go away. There are those who are concerned that the technology will obviate the need for people like you and me to be involved in the process anymore. I gather you are not in that camp.
Yeah, I've thought of that often, but I haven't ever seen I don't really ever see that happening. There may be a different breed of us that come around, people that are much more technologically savvy than potentially you or I are. I find that there's always a need for improvement, which, we can always help because we understand the life cycle of material that is required for cases, right? And I think sometimes, I guess I could say the younger generation. I'm not trying to say that I'm better because I'm older. And that's not the case. But there's always a need for somebody who understands the full life cycle for things that are potentially missed in cases, right? And I look at cases, review cases, and kind of as a weird pastime, actually, read judgments from judges and summary judgments and things of that nature. And I find that a lot of times that they probably didn't get all of the information that they have because it's so hard to narrow down the information that we have today to those few bullets that are required. And then are we making cases based upon that? So I'm actually really interested in this, the whole chatbot IA approach that might really assist judges, especially in cases such as the Office of Immigration Review in the Department of Justice that have cases that are very similar in nature and very straightforward in nature, and they're very repetitive. But a lot of times, the judges have to move so quickly that they're not aware of all of the case law that is coming out and the judgments that are coming out so quickly. So I look forward to potentially, a company such as yours or other companies coming up with, sort of a judge assisted chatbot that can help them gather quickly information to make decisions based upon cases that are happening at lightning speed today. And I think that
Well,
judges really
from
need something from that.
your ears to our development team, we'll see where we get with that.
Can you imagine if you're a judge and you're sitting there thinking, and there's cases that are happening every day, and you have to wait for them to be written up, and then all of a sudden, hey, that could have changed the outcome of this particular case because I wasn't sure that I could actually use that case law to help confirm this case. So I look at that and I think that would be a really good use case for some of that intelligent software.
While we are pondering possibilities, what other things do you think could be accomplished using, for example, generative AI capabilities such as ChatGPT?
Yeah, so there's, obviously the I think the rapidness in which that we are receiving information is always concerning to me, right? So how do we know that we have actually categorized everything? Have we missed something? I mean, we are talking about just um, bits and bytes that are coming across the wire, and we're utilizing those bits and bytes and we're putting them into wonderful graphics and timelines and categorization and all of that. But are we really getting the essence of all of that? yes, we can narrow it down. We can create, really nice portfolios of information, but how are we really leveraging this massive amount of data that we don't have the personnel to be able to read or to thoroughly digest? I think there's a real need for, the AI in sort of the chatbot arena to be able to come in and to do some scoping, not necessarily make decisions for us, but help us scope out, do I have the totality of information that I'm looking for, and release those bots into the vast majority of the material that we've collected and come up with some really clever analysis and saying yes, we have everything, or even helping attorneys do, hey, we need a second round of discovery. We don't have everything that we need, or we don't think that we have everything we need. And I see this as really something helping to accelerate case loads. And right now we're overwhelmed in federal court. So what we're trying to do is figure out how can we accelerate the amount of data that we're asking for, because if we have to go out and seize that data or put that data into drives and then push it up into the cloud and process it, that can take some time given the amount of data that we have. So is there a way that we can release a chat bot within the seize side of data and say, okay, do we have everything that we need, or maybe there's other things that we've missed, and how can we comb through that and pull that data into what we have? Now obviously there's a lot of legalities based upon that you'd have to get warrants and permission to do, but the technology, I believe, is there, and I believe that could be super helpful.
You have a perspective, a view into what happens on the governmental side of e-discovery that many of us do not. What sort of pearls of wisdom can you provide to us when it comes to all of that?
Well, within the federal government, I think what people and this is something why I've just been doing this, and probably DOJ has been my primary focus and primary passion for my career, is because these are people that do work that is really difficult. I mean, when I talk to colleagues that work in legal firms across the board, and not saying that they don't also work very hard, they do work very hard, but they're just not used to the volume of the data that the government receives. In an antitrust, for example, they may receive petabytes of information that legally they're responsible to go through. They can't just obfuscate and say, well, we don't want to go through that drive because we have all of them. They're legally obligated to go through every single document.
Where
Every,
is this data coming from?
So in an antitrust case, it's coming from the two corporations that the government is trying to decide, is there a collusion or are there antitrust laws that are being violated? Is this good for the American public? Right? So if we have the last case that was there was Sprint and not Sprint, Spirit Air and Frontier Air, right? Is it a good thing for them to come together and formulate a company? A lot of people get into religious wars of capitalism and free market and all of that. But without the Department of Justice and without any trust, we make some really bad decisions when it comes to limiting the American economy with choices. And the only way that they can make these decisions are by requesting so much information that it's overwhelming. I mean, if you're, I mean, any trust in itself, along with other divisions such as civil or criminal or civil rights, all of these people and that are working as government folks, they are deluged by data.
So if the volume of data is overwhelming and they're deluged with it, and yet at the same time they have to get through it and figure out what's in there and what to do about it, how, to the extent you're in a position to share with us, how do they deal with that?
Long hours, long hours, and a dedication. And you have to remember, a lot of these people, they're on government salaries. They're not on private salaries, but yet they feel this mission that they are doing the American public a service by watching out for them at these levels where us as normal Americans would not have access or understanding about what is going on in these cases. And just the to the American public, I mean, we spend an inordinate amount of time in litigation against bad criminals, drug lords, and all these other things that we see on the news in these criminal type of cases. And we have programs that support um, these enforcement agencies. I can't go down too deep into them, but we're using analytics now to understand how these things come into play. How are they moved? How are they trafficked? Where are they created? We did a thing for a thing. We did a pilot for the ATF, and they wanted to understand in this one particular area of the country why there were so many gun applications. And when we did just a virtual heat map, we showed that 95% of all of the applications came from one address.
Okay.
Yeah. So not
Yeah.
very good,
And
right? So we were able
right.
to then show them, and this was data that was real, and this was a
Hmm.
past case, but we were able to show them quickly this is what is happening. So data,
Yeah.
amounts of data, huge amounts of data today with the tools that we have are phenomenal. But from a government standpoint, the thing that they always have is even though we have more data, the data ever increases. And we've done studies where we've seen up to 3,000% over year of data coming in and dealing with it. So the government always is struggling with ingestion issues. How do we ingest this data? How do we make sure that all of it's ingested? And that is the biggest, probably the most largest hurdle they have. They know what to do with the data once they have it. It's how do we get that data and how do we get it into our systems and use it correctly? And these guys sit there and scratch their heads all day long of going, oh, I just got another 4 petabytes of data. What do I do with it? And what is there? What's actually
Right.
useful, right? And so I know some of the tools that are being developed today are really good triage tools. They're saying this is junk and that's bad and that's business email and I don't want to hear about Johnny's invitation to his birthday party, but I got to go through this guy's email and I got to get to the nut of
Mhm.
what's going on here and to the real data. And that's always difficult. So that's, some of the insight into the government for your viewers is these guys work really hard
Yeah. And to
and they
your
need
early
all the help they can.
and to your earlier point, it's not as if the data they are going through is laid out in a straightforward fashion.
No.
They're not reading text messages saying, "I intend to do this bad thing in this way."
Well, you'd be surprised
Sometimes,
actually how
yeah.
many times you find that.
I don't know if that's
Some people are still not that smart, right? But there are other
yeah.
people, you're right, George, that
Right.
they basically hide what they're doing and they obfuscate it. So then we need these, forensic individuals who come in and they can backtrack the trail and find the real, smoking gun. And sometimes it takes some massive amounts of tools to be able to find these. And we're talking about and understand, like, if you read the news about a hurricane or uh, market crash or what's currently going on today in our political arena, all of that somewhere ends up back at DOJ. And whether it's a case or not, or whether precedent needs to be reviewed, all of that data has to come. And it's just a massive amount of data that needs to be handled and properly dealt with. And so, anytime that you read something in the news, think about your federal government folks who are serving you daily trying to help you. And what we're trying to do as companies is to help them do their job better and help them have a better grasp and a quicker grasp on what they do.
If we can take now the last few minutes as an opportunity to circle back in a way and have you tell us a little bit more about where you and your organization actually fits into that overall process.
That's a really good question. I think we're, in the within the federal space, the biggest you like to walk in and just say, hey, I've got a solution for you. Trust me, it's going to work.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, we have procurement rules that really don't allow us to do that. So a lot of times we have to, in our organization, we have to take tools and we have to take ideas and we have to meet with those that would be best served by them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your company profits from that. It just means that you're trying to serve them. But then typically what would come out is that there would be a proposal effort or what they would consider to be a response for proposal or an RFP would come out, and then you would have to respond to that, and hopefully that your work and what you have said will guarantee will help you win that work. But it doesn't always mean that way, because there's a lot of companies out there today. When I first started working in the federal government, um, there was really no electronic mechanism for them to get out requests for proposals. They came over a fax, believe it or not. And then we'd read it and we go, okay, well, what's this? And we would then type up a response and fax it back over to them and give them a price and hope that it would win. Today, there are literally hundreds of thousands of companies that do very similar things to what we do. And so, what we try to do is basically be the smarter person out there and try to be the more helpful person and try to help them understand that we as a firm can come in and help them do these types of analytics, or bring in tools and help them integrate the process and help train their folks on how to use it more effectively, because a lot of tools unfortunately get purchased because somebody had a vision for it, but it gets lost in translation sometimes, or the mechanism for putting it out there to the users in the government arena doesn't always go smoothly. And there can be technical issues, there can be platform issues, and now that everything is going in the cloud, we have to ensure that everything is FedRAMPed. And that is a word that is really just for your users. I mean your viewers, not your users. Your viewers is a government term that means that we have certified that it is safe for the government people to use this in this cloud environment, whether that's a moderate or a high uh, type of rating for classified material or sensitive material, and then moderate for just mostly being secure. And we understand that there's issues with cloud and cloud-based tools, from a from a security perspective. So firms like us, we try to come in and say, hey, look, we have tools and we're working with them to get them into the cloud and FedRAMP certified, or if there's that classified, maybe we still put them behind your firewall. So we see ourselves as an advisory capacity. We see ourselves as trying to stay out of front. We spend time at places like Legal Week, which was just here, trying to find the greatest, best, newest type of thing. But it's really through relationships that we have with the customers, where they can call us or we can call them and saying, hey, have you been able to see this? Have you been able to digest what this might be able to do for you? And then usually what comes next is, how much does that cost? Because I have a budget that I have to keep within. And you're like, oh yeah, it's expensive, but see how much it would help you. And so usually there's a whole proposal process and a point, a POC, a proof of concept, and then hopefully there's adoption, right? So the cycle is long. As we're take a commercial company 2 or 3 months maybe to get everything pulled in together. The government is a large ship, and so the rudder moves the direction slowly, and wisely. And I think this is a good thing mostly. They take their time. Maybe they take too much time, but mostly they take enough time to try to make a right decision. And I think many of them have their own opinions, but they have to live in the world that they are in, and they have to go through the proper procedures so that our government maintains this fair and open competition standard.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for giving us this insight to a side of the e-discovery world that I think many of our listeners really are not that familiar with. Joe Friend is a partner at AITHERAS. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation. Good to see you again, George.
Likewise.